Well, the hour of 6 has arrived, so we'll get the Planning Commission meeting for Monday, February 19th going. Please call the roll.
Okay. Commissioner Barnes,
Here?
Commissioner Chorin,
Here.
Commissioner Stoker,
Here.
Alderman Parrish,
Here.
Mayor Nurbin.
Here. We have a quorum? Barely. First up, we have approval of the minutes from January 22nd.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or corrections? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Before we get into regular business, I do want to make an announcement for one cancellation. It's not even on the agenda because it was canceled before the agenda was authored, but comment cards were sent out to residents, so in case there's anyone, on the off chance there's someone interested in the Karen and Gerald split Gerber specimen tree removal application, that item is not going to be on the agenda tonight. That'll be on for next month. So sorry about that. There's a couple of outstanding issues that were not tied up, and we couldn't even get it on the agenda. So come back next month, please, or send us a letter. Either way. So with that announcement, we'll move on to our only regular business item tonight, Tracy and Michael Lalonde. The applicant is seeking a building and site plan amendment approval to allow for renovation for office use for the property located at 6714 West Mequon Road. We have several people signed up to speak tonight, but I think we're going to do a quick staff overview, and we'll pause and get into the comments from the public. There's just one question from, come up to the podium, ma'am. Yeah, just come up to the podium. You can ask a question. Is this on the item that was canceled?
We weren't aware that it was canceled. We were wondering why it was canceled and what the additional issues are.
I think staff could answer that question better, but
Well, who would I
there were some
ask?
incomplete materials that didn't allow it to be on the agenda. We thought it was going to be, but they didn't get a couple of things in time, so it'll just be coming back before us.
Well, nobody let us know that there were additional items needed.
Are you the applicant?
Yes.
That's a different story than I was told. So please.
So- The applicant for the application was Lakeside Development. They were made aware of the.
Okay, so Lakeside was informed, but Lakeside never informed their client.
Correct.
Okay. Sorry about that. Moving on, let's do the staff report on the lawn item.
So applicant seeking a building and site plan approval for converting a former woodworking shop into a couple individual office spaces for people who work from home, people that might not be able to work from home, just kind of individual offices that individuals can rent. It's on a B3 limited site, so office and service district, somewhat west of Spur 16 and town center. It's on a 0.83 acre site, which is less than the minimum lot size for that district, but it also doesn't meet some of the other standards of the code, like parking lot setback and offsets for the site. This was originally came about from a building permit submitted by the applicant to convert, just do the conversion, but they didn't meet their parking lot minimums, and they needed to expand the parking lot 4 feet to the south, and then they needed to expand their driveway from 18 to 22 feet to meet the true 2-lane drive aisles. Applicant isn't supporting any other improvements to the site other than that. The building that exists there right now, the proposed office building, has pretty good quality materials, even though they're a bit dated. It's stone as a base on the walls, and then the gable ends have aluminum and vinyl siding, or vinyl siding. City Attorney John Woodward let staff know about a ongoing dispute between the owner of this parcel and the adjacent homeowners association with a unauthorized and trespassing removal of trees from the HOA's property. So as a condition of this report, no final occupancy will be granted until that issue is resolved with the HOA. And then there was a pretty large contingent of neighborhood sentiment garnered around kind of concern about the developers' actions in the past and how they might affect the future, and kind of just around the noise and light pollution that might come off of having more intense services going to that address. Staff created a, let me pull it up here, a landscaping plan suggested that indicates some trees on the north side, on the north lot line here. It's on the, and then there's a 6-foot privacy fence, which is the maximum allowed by our parking lot landscaping and fencing standards. Some low growth areas to the south of the parking lot and to the north of it. A couple street trees and along this driveway, some larger ones. And they also just need to meet their landscaping standards for a parking lot, which includes 10% of the interior landscaped and 30% shading in the summer within 10 years. And then other conditions, it's just the standard ones. So there are letters of credit for installation and maintenance of landscaping, final landscaping and project plans to staff within 180 days. No access to River Birch Drive from the north. I know that was that was a point of contention for some of the neighbors, making sure that no driveway or any other commercial traffic would be going out that way. And then the final occupancy portion.
Thank you. Before we get into questions from the commissioners, I'll do the public comment portion of the meeting now that there's a little bit of background info out there, and then we'll bring it back to the planning commission and let the applicant respond to anything that comes out of any and all of that discussion. So we have a few people scheduled to speak here. I think about 5 applications. Time limit's 5 minutes. So we'll give you all your 5 minutes shortly here. So the first up is Laura Reinholtz, opposes and wishes to speak from 11264 North River Drive.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Laura Reinholz, and I am
Oh, sorry, you
waiting
have to
to get
push
this
the,
set. Okay.
you're live
Good
now.
evening, everyone. Can you hear me now? Okay. I'm Laura Reinholz. I am the president of the River Birch Place Condominium Owners Association, and we've been neighbors in the area since 2015. So I'm speaking both as the president and also as a neighbor. And actually, we used to live pretty much in our backyard, so we've been in the general area since 2003, and we've been in Mequon since 1989. I would like to just speak about a number of different items that were included with in the packet, and I'll address them. Some of them I was able to get some information from the city already earlier, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with things. As you know, at least 11 neighbors in 2 different neighborhoods that are on the northwest and also the east side have expressed different concerns. Some of the concerns are accurate. Some of the concerns are not quite right. For instance, the potential access point onto River Birch Drive, that is specifically for Lot 1, which if you look at your maps is not this actual parcel. I hope that the parcels will never be put together, but the concern about the access should not be an issue at all because it does not relate to this exact parcel. The business proposal from LL Business Suites suggests that they would have many renters in single offices, not one business with several employees, as some of the neighbors had thought that would be the case. And I just want to make sure that we understand what type of businesses are allowed. I'm not sure if it's any type of office that is allowed or not. I don't know if there's any need for any additional office space. I know that there's a considerable amount of office capacity in the general area. I'm not certain about the hours that are going to be allowed. Hopefully there will be typical daytime hours and not extending late into the evening in order to provide for a neighborly a neighborhood, more of a residential area. The LL Business Suites shows that there is a conference area, and the packet actually that they provided, their marketing materials, I thought it said there was a conference room. Some of the different potential uses would be for therapists, and obviously you'd want to make sure you have privacy for that. I don't know if there are chairs in that area. I'm not certain if there's enough room inside in order to have people maneuver and be comfortable. I did notice that there is one small window in each office, which is good, but it did not identify whether or not there is any ADA compliance. It does not look like the bathroom is very large. I do not know about the width of the doors to the offices, if there are any steps going into the building, if there are any ramps. I do not know if the kitchen is ADA compliant. There are 11 spaces for the parking lot. One of them is ADA. It certainly makes sense that 34 years after ADA passed in 1990, that all buildings should be ADA compliant. And I do know of another building in the area that is not completely ADA compliant, and it's rather frustrating for those people who cannot have access. I am not that person, but there's someone in my family who is. I also want to bring up that the zoning analysis identified that it's on 0.83 acres, which is less than the 1.5 acres. And that I believe that 0.83 acres also includes the structure in front, the home in front of the structure. So I'm hoping that that area will never ever be split, because that would make it even more non-conforming, recognizing the space and the location. Regarding landscaping, it does state that there's a licensed architect required for this work. I do appreciate that. I hope that some of the landscaping installation will actually extend beyond what the staff has recommended. For instance, there are homes directly to the east of this property, and staff recommended a fence, which is one of the items requested by some of the different neighbors in the area. However, I think that for aesthetics and also for screening, it would make a lot more sense to have that fence go all the way south to Mequon Road. It would completely clear the area, completely separate it, instead of having it come down and then it actually turns west a little bit. So as cars are going down the driveway, they may or may not, some of the headlights may still be an issue. Plus, I think from a sound standpoint, noise, and if there's any lighting in the parking lot, having a fence go the entire direction, the entire way to Mequon Road would be very appropriate. I'm not certain who would or would not be able to actually do the work. I know that for the work being done on the north side, it was suggested not by Mr. Lalonde, but by someone else who was in conversation with Mr. Lalonde, that they may be more interested in doing that restoration of the work that they damaged. I would prefer that actually the work is done by someone else. Another issue is the trees and the bushes. Are they going to provide screening in the winter and the summer? In other words, are they going to continue to hold things down? Access to Mequon Road, WISDOT has to provide an approval. Will they allow that, allow things to continue before that, or do they have to get the approval first? Mr. Lalonde owns 3 properties. What is the long-term plan for the other properties? It would make sense to have coordination. And finally, Mr. Lalonde unfortunately has shown very little regard to neighbors, and he may not have acted in good faith with the city, and certainly not with River Birch Place. We have reached out to him. As you know, he had unauthorized clearing of trees and vegetation in 2022, and I'm not over to the north and to the east. I'm not certain if some of it was to the west. He burned wood illegally at that time. We reached out several times, including via certified mail. There was no response via calls, email, or certified mail. And he also was very verbally abusive to one of the neighbors who directly abuts his property. So it's been very challenging. We would like to be neighborly. At the same time, we are very concerned. And there's a trust issue that's kind of concerning to us. We are working with the city attorney, and Mr. Lalonde has agreed to restitution, but we're requesting that no work permits, no work be allowed until financial restitution is completed. What you have in front of you says that no occupancy, but we've been working on this. This is an old case. It's moving forward. We need to get closure for us, and so that he can also get things working as well. Finally, there is also a stop work order issued on February 13th because some work already has been done on the site. So as a neighbor and as the president of the River Birch Place Homeowners Association, we wanted to just make sure that we have a neighborhood that will continue to be a neighborhood, and that we have proper screening, and that long-term maintenance is also going to be taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Alan Neva, wishes to speak, 6871 West River Birch Drive.
How's it going? That was wonderful, by the way. I'm here in support of the neighborhood in River Birch community. I'm 6871. I also own the lot next to my home, and so essentially I'm west of this intended commercial remodel. And I will tell you that there has been a complete disregard for a neighborly process with regards to this project. I do believe an individual has a right to build and pursue their development interests as long as it meets and satisfies the attributes of a community, specifically ours, being residential. And more specifically, I recall the time when they were burning all these trees. I was home with a 12-month-old, had to leave my own home because of all the smoke that caused and the congestion in our neighborhood. 12 months old, and our home smelled like complete smoke. Completely disappointing and incredibly frustrating. The fact that they want to put a street connection on River Birch, which this is a commercial building in a residential neighborhood, is quite frankly a little ridiculous when there are a number of us that have small children in the neighborhood that actively play outside. And it's just expressing a lot of concern, and specifically with regards to all the trees they removed. Again, my house is to the west of this development. It's completely lack of coverage and creating, more visual exposure to this property. So, with the considerations being done with the landscaping, obviously some things have been done in the right direction, but if more coverage could be considered for the western facing side of the property, obviously that'd be greatly appreciated. Because with the removal of all the trees and then obviously the burning and things like that in nature and the challenges that the neighborhood experienced through that, it definitely creates more exposure and to have lights and bring that type of light pollution into the neighborhood is also really concerning. So I guess I'm more of a global aspect of the concern with how this whole process has been handled, the concerns as a residential neighborhood that this would bring to our community, and knowing that this project as it stands now would not only not add value to our community, but cause concerns with safety and a commercial aspect that really I don't know if is going to help provide any value to where we live. So I know these aren't easy decisions. Appreciate the conversation. I've never really been to one of these meetings before, so I built my home 2 years ago, and I had to follow very strict and as I respected, right? Because we had to bring a home to our community to make sure that it would support the residential aspect of where I live, and the people of the River Birch community were very respectful, and I'm very thankful because now I have a wonderful home where I can now start my family. And I know there are other people that built homes in our neighborhood, and they're really good people, and they were very equitable and considerate individuals. So it's really just disappointing that it's really come to these types of communications, and really hope Mequon could really strongly consider what's being discussed here today, because it is important, it is extremely concerning. So I do support all the comments being here today, and that's really all I have to say. So thanks, I appreciate your time.
Oops, turn my mic back on. Thank you. Next, we have Steve Schaefer, opposes and wishes to speak, 6944 West River Birch Drive.
Good evening. Thanks for the moment to speak. Evan, do you mind pulling up the graphic, I think, in your packet regarding the landscaping, the current view? I want to speak this evening primarily to the landscaping concerns we have living to the north side of this proposed development. Here's a snapshot, which I think he took 2 weeks ago, of the property across, essentially across from our condominium. This property was clear cut 2 or 3 years ago from River Birch clear all the way up to Mequon Road. Do you have, Evan, the Google map view? For your reference, this is what it looked like 3 years ago. We had solid timber. I spoke to the city and the forester. Evan spoke on my behalf this afternoon. I understand what we did was legal. It's definitely not neighborly, but there were sizable trees cut down over the past, I'm not sure when he began the clear cutting action, but the trees are gone. Do you also have an overhead view of what this draping looks like. Okay, here was a picture taken a couple of years ago, shortly after clear cutting. Mr. Lalonde, I understand, owns 3 parcels. The parcel which was clear cut from Mequon Road back to River Birch, as well as the subject parcel to the lower right, and then also a home to the right, upper right, which I know is under the concerns with the neighboring homeowner association. But all these trees, there were hundreds, if not thousands of trees and shrubs taken down on the left-hand parcel, as well as trees taken down the lower right, or right side trees. What I'm requesting, not on behalf of our association, but on behalf of myself living to the upper left-hand corner of this picture, is him to put in additional landscaping in this area to shield this housing. Not, obviously we realize that we can't recreate what was there in the past, but can we put in more landscaping to shield the structures from our views as it was when we moved in 15 years ago? With that, thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. Our last speaker is the applicant, Mike Lalonde, supports and wishes to speak. P.O. Box 396, Grafton, Wisconsin. Not sure if we can take a P.O. box, but we know where you live.
Well, you could use any of those addresses. I live in Cedarburg. Well, good evening. I'm here just to kind of speak on this. We've got a lot of outrage and some people that are concerned of what we're doing there. This is really just a kind of a pet project. This isn't life or death for me. It's actually my wife's project is what we're talking about. I originally wanted to make it residential and put a group home there, and she said no, she wanted to do something different. It was a woodworking shop. We've had some, one person that was looking to rent it to that. My wife and I are from the community. We talked to people. I own several companies. My wife is a real estate agent. We have some friends that we talked about, we're working out at homes, and it would be nice to have a small office building or a place that you could go and meet with someone or maybe even just get out of the house. One of our clients is an engineer. He was involved with the developments downtown. And so that's really how the origin of this little office building came. So prior to it, it was a wood shop, sanding, saws, the whole bit, with Kim working it. And they're right, I own all 3 properties, my wife and I do. This is just a building that's just underutilized, and we're just looking to utilize it. When we went to the city, we found out they wanted 2-way traffic, and then the requirements was a 10-space parking lot. We felt it was overkill, but we've got to abide by what the rules are. Like I said, for my business, I'd be using it maybe 2 times a week, and it's not a high traffic area. It's not like a bagel shop or something else that could be put there, which is actually zoned for. And so I guess that I wanted to kind of speak on that behalf, that we're not looking at a high traffic. We're looking at a very docile, sort of convenient office space, mainly for my use. And so I just wanted to kind of put that out there a little bit. This is not the end-all be-all for this property. We've been approached several times for developers. People have offered us deals for the property. We're just, I'm kind of a collector. We have this property. We've got properties throughout the state of Wisconsin, and I kind of like collecting them. So I really don't have any plans. Everyone's, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And honestly, I'm not going to do anything with it until I get either the price I want, or someone makes an offer I can't refuse, or I'll just keep it and I'll just hand it down to my kids. So I wanted to kind of clear that up. Tracy and I, like I said, Tracy's spearheading this, and she's been working pretty diligently with the city. We just got the suggested plan for the landscape and stuff like that. We have no problem with that. I mean, that's not a big deal. I do agree with some things. I don't agree with some other things. I think that's something that we can work through. I don't think that's a deal breaker. So that's kind of where I am at that. And I'm speaking for her on that too. It's really not a big deal. With the driveway, obviously the driveway needs 2 lanes. Again, that's because, you know, you have this quote-unquote office business and they have, you know, for traffic, you have to have egress and for two-way traffic. Do we need that? No. For what we're gonna use it for? No. But like I said, we're abiding by the requirements of the city. The DOT and I have been talking. We actually just signed the temporary easement for the DOT to take care of the driveway. That's actually gonna be tacked on to a contract this spring. So that's already in the works, so that's not gonna be a problem. In fact, the DOT approached us on it. And so that's something that's really a non-starter also. And I guess some of the things is we really just want to utilize the building mainly for our use and just maybe a couple friends of ours. And if we pick up a tenant or two from the apartments down the way, great. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Before we get going much further, can we bring up the Google Maps overhead view, the satellite view, and just with everyone watching here, draw. Well, if there's someone else, please just go up to the podium and state your name. And I think we lost a piece of paper along the way here.
Yeah, it probably
Sorry
fell
about
off
that.
on the floor somewhere. Oh, this is interesting. All right. I'm Jeff Schouten, live at 6942 West River Birch. So that's just to the northwest of the property. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to address the Planning Commission. We live approximately, I'd say 150 yards to the west. So that view that Steve showed of the property from the north and northwest with basically all the trees devastated is what we see when we walk out of our front door. But I want to back up. My question, and I know it's not being addressed tonight, but I just want to put it in your heads, is why is this parcel even zoned for business? It may have been appropriate 45 years ago when probably some guy who's into woodworking decided to open up a business in a shop. I don't know when it was made business, but at that time, you're probably looking at fields and trees and nothing around there. I'm sure the road wasn't there, Concord Creek wasn't there, and so that was easy. But it's really not appropriate now. This is a residential area. The entire surrounding area is residential. It's not a field. It's not woodlands. But I don't think a business is appropriate on the parcel of land, and maybe we ought to keep up with the times and turn it back to residential. But given that, I have three main concerns with the plan as proposed. They've all been mentioned, so I'll keep it rather short. We'd like to know the longer-term plans for the larger property, which includes 3 rental homes in addition to the business. What are the development plans? Are they going to propose more rezoning for more businesses, apartments, mixed-use development? And are they going to add to traffic? Are they going to maintain the current properties or let them deteriorate? I'm not sure what the use is for those properties. And will their development further affect the River Birch neighborhood or our property values? I would think the city would like to have an idea what's in store, as would we. We looked at page 28, the view of the Lalonde property. I really want to emphasize that the west was well shielded with trees from that property until they were chopped down and burned in 2022. They didn't replace the trees with any type of landscaping or lawn. They left an empty field of stumps that grow thick with weeds and thorny scrub bushes every summer. All they do is once a summer cut them down and make random mulch piles around with the weeds and the scrub bushes. So I like the plan to address the west side of the property. I'd like to see it properly landscaped and shielded somewhat from the neighborhood to the west as well, which it was 3 years ago. Certainly not pleasant to walk past there every day. And we support your recommendation not to build a driveway out to River Birch Drive. It's a quiet residential street, many children and grandchildren, and I don't want to see them playing Frogger on their way to school with business traffic coming in and out off of River Birch Drive. So we propose that the current plan be disapproved until a larger picture can come into view or significantly changed with some of the comments you've had here from the residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, good, we've got the map up. So with everyone watching, could you roughly draw a box around the one parcel out of the three we're considering tonight? Because we can't, unfortunately, talk about the other two. We only have the one item in front of us on the parcel at hand, and I can appreciate the comments about how this may not make sense as a LTD overlay now, but the unfortunate fact is it does have it, and that gives them legal rights to do certain things. We just have to live with the fact that a council decades ago rezoned it and put that in place, and that's what's there now. So we're not talking about rezoning it. I don't think that any of the other two parcels would be likely rezoned in alignment with that, but we nonetheless have to live with the zoning that's here today. That's the legal right of the property owner. But just so everyone understands, it's that parcel. I agree that what's happened with the western parcel is unfortunate, and hopefully there's a long-term plan to make that look nicer than it does today, but that is not what we're here for tonight, unfortunately. So with that understanding, are there any questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Schaefer.
I have a lot of questions, but I want to hear what my fellow commissioners have to say, but just from a procedural perspective, I'm fairly certain a P.O. box doesn't suffice, so I just did a quick search for your address, easily accessible in white pages, in case Mrs. Bazell wants to take it down. It's West 49, North 636, Cedar Reserve Circle in Cedarburg. Is that accurate? What is that? Your address, that's not a P.O. box? Okay. That's just... In this setting, though, it has to be a physical address.
Well, we won't debate that, but you are correct. A P.O. box isn't appropriate, so thank you for reading that into the record. Does Commissioner Schaefer have any more questions? Okay. Commissioner Stoker.
I may have missed it in the packet. What type of hours? I understand the concept. And again, given the temperature of the atmosphere, I would only ask, if you're renting these suites to two individuals, what's going to prevent them from going in at 9 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night? I happen to work at late at night, and I guess I want to make it clear that would be our expectation, and I don't know if we can limit the hours or okay.
These are permitted, this is a permitted use under the B3 zoning district, so it's not a conditional use, and there's no limitation on the hours in the B3, so.
That's what I was wondering. I noticed it was conveniently out of the packet, so. My second question is, you mentioned that you were okay with the landscaping, you can work through the details. I guess just from driving by there in the last couple of days, I don't object. Someone recommended bringing the fence down to Mequon Road. I think that's more between staff and yourself. I would also like to see it go a little further north, just to give some protection for the people that are in the residents on the northeast corner of the property. I'm not saying it's got to go all the way to River Birch, but if it can go a little further north, which leads me to my last question for right now too, is, again, I read the brochure. There's mention of a patio out back. I don't see it on the plans. And again, not totally understanding your clients. There is mention that you could have, outdoor activities, and I'm envisioning cocktail parties or something like that, and I just think we need to be sensitive to the neighbors, and hence my support for probably more landscape shielding. But I didn't know if that was really in the plans, or that was just a nice way to put it in the brochure. Or
Well, just to kind of give you a little bit, that was just a patio for people to step outside
Commissioner Chorin.
A couple of these questions really are staff. I'm gonna need some input. So it's a B3 with an overlay. And it noted that there were a number of things that it didn't meet, the lot size, which then would be non-conforming. I mean, we can't do anything about the lot size, certainly. The building offset and the driveway offset would be corrected given the recommendations from staff, correct?
Well, they would be corrected, but they would be more mitigated with the landscaping and the privacy fence. And
I also understand that a 6-foot fence is the maximum by code, but should one of us suggest an 8-foot? We could do that, correct?
Well, I mean, I guess we just gotta be careful, cause the only one we've had that has exceeded 6 foot is the quick trip fence that was put up with regard to some of the neighbor issues there, and when you get over 6 feet, it becomes difficult to make those stay structurally sound and hold their shape. So you can go higher, but it sometimes going higher doesn't necessarily make it better.
I drove around there, and the topography, are the lots to the east, where are they in relationship to this present lot, elevation wise?
you have the contours on here.
I mean, is it fairly level, or is one higher than the other?
I could probably answer that.
Yeah. It looks fairly level.
It is. It all drains to the north, and then there's a wetland area directly behind, just to the north of our land there. And so everything kind of drains into that right next to the high tension wires. So it really does kind of follow its own, they're about the same, and then it actually comes around, the road actually just drains around and then spills into a wetland back there.
Okay.
To answer your question, they're about level.
The house to the north, obviously they have an easement. I mean, the only way they can get to the house off Mequon, from Mequon Road is through this other parcel. So there has to be some sort of easement, correct?
Yeah, this goes back 20 years. There's an easement through the property, and when River Birch was developed, that's where the access to River Birch was put in for that last house. So if they wanted to add an access point to that northern house to River Birch, they were allowed to under the previously approved plan. But currently, it's all through the same easement through that properties to the south.
There was a comment made about the plan meeting ADA. I'm assuming that would be all handled with the plan approval and once they submit the plan. And there was a comment made about extending the fence to the north. I mean, the furthest we could take it from what you've suggested is to the property line, right? I think that's all I got.
Any other comments or questions? Now's the time to get them out there. Commissioner Schaefer?
Shocking. Evan, will you go back to that view of the prior landscaping?
On the GIS?
Oh, was that what it was? The picture that the gentleman, one of the neighbors had asked for, I think it was before these trees got burned down? Cut and burned?
Right here.
Yes, sir. Are those evergreen trees? None of that is there. And none of that was like, it doesn't appear to be. Okay. I guess you don't have to answer this, but perhaps in a neighborly fashion, you would consider answering why.
I'm sorry, what is that?
Why did, I mean, remember when this happened and driving by and thinking, what in the world? Because frankly, from a Mequon perspective, I mean, we're blessed and work hard to have properties that look good. And this almost, from a Mequon standard, it was almost like a blighted area after that happened? Is there, you don't have to answer, but I would love to understand the why behind that.
Not we clear cut our property, and the other stuff is, still in litigation, so I really can't speak on that, what they're saying with the trees and on those particular evergreens. The trees are still there, but I can't really speak to that because.
Because you're in active litigation?
Yep.
And I believe that's the parcel to the west.
I
Maybe
get
there's
it.
some,
I know that that's
maybe there's
not,
some that's in the middle, I'm not sure. Well,
it's not
everything's
part
to
of
the
the
west
parcel we're
as a
discussing, but it
whole.
certainly is relevant
Right.
from a neighbor perspective, from the visibility that has been created to the parcel that we're discussing. And certainly, whether it was your legal right to do it or not, I think I definitely hear what the neighbors are and feel what the neighbors are saying about whether that was a neighborly action, because you don't.
Well,
Wanna-
but just to understand that, this is not the end all be all for this property. This is going to happen no matter what. And so, when I say that this is kind of just this is not a life or death thing. This is going to happen no matter what. So I'm a little proactive. Plus, I get a little antsy, and I like to do things. So I went in there and I cut down all my trees.
This is going to happen no matter what, referring to
The
development?
development of that property.
Yeah.
We've been approached. I think the master plan. What is the master plan for that property? It's
It's just zone
multifamily?
B3, and it is a little island in the middle of all the residential.
Oh, no. I'm
and
sorry,
it's-
not to interrupt you, but the master plan for the city is multifamily, and it's a pretty dense area for that. Right now, we've just got these. These are some pretty nice little homes that I picked up, and they're fun to play with and stuff like that. But those will all be gone, and sooner or later, this is all going to be taken care of. I can't answer the ones to the west. We have a power line that goes through there,
Yep.
and we had to remove those. And
Understand the power
I'm kind of a doer, so if I'm going to be there with my crews, I'm going to do it all.
Yeah, I guess Mayor's probably like, why is she so far off topic? I know the parcel in which we are focusing on. I also struggle to keep it. To me, it's relevant. The entire aspect is relevant because of the impact around the surrounding neighbors. It's tricky to have this little island of B3 in the middle of all these residential. You certainly have rights as a landowner. I struggle with the fact that you keep referring to this as your hobby, and you're a collector, and we're talking about how what I feel like is not, what I haven't heard or inferred from anything you said is any consideration for the fact that you are surrounded by a residential area. And so it might be your hobby, but you're talking about how it impacts where people live their entire life, right? Their homes, which is very important to all of us.
Well, yeah, and I live in a house also, and
No,
I
you
can
failed to
understand
provide
but
that address.
what's that?
Nothing.
Oh, it's Cedarburg, and we have standards in
Got it.
Cedarburg also. And we have we have standards in Kenosha, Racine, Mount Pleasant, Wapaka, all those too. There was no malice intended. I wanted the trees gone, so I took them down, and I own all 3 properties, and that I don't have to ask anyone permission for that.
You surely don't.
Right, and so I don't want to defend myself there, but like I said, this is not the end of this property. This property will be developed. It probably not by me, because I'm just, I've got too many things going on, but we've been approached several times since we've owned these, and it just so happened that I was able to acquire all 3 of them, and I guess that might be rubbing the wrong way, but I don't apologize for that.
Okay, and as a property owner, you have rights, and you don't have to care about anyone around you and how it impacts them. That's your choice. That's your choice, your karma. I would say it's very difficult for me to feel out how to oppose this, because in my gut I oppose it, because it's too nebulous to say there's 8 office spaces in this property. Is that accurate?
No.
Why does it say 1 through 8 then on that map? Can we go to that little page that has? And while we're doing that, my point.
So there's 5. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, that's a number 6, but that might be the, I don't know if that's the conference room. Like I said, this is not my project. This is my wife's.
But I would say the fact that it's so nebulous and it can be, you throw a lot of generalities around about, oh, it could be this, it could be this. As Commissioner Stoker meant, we can't enforce the hours that people are going to be there. We can't enforce specific types of business because it's a permitted use. And unfortunately, based on how the actions that have been taken thus far, I feel very uncomfortable with this, and I don't know how to best oppose it. So anyone who has any way to oppose, that would be what I would like to do. I know you're leaning on your legal rights, and that's great, but you're not being neighborly.
It wasn't my intention. Like I said, I went out and I cut some trees down. They have means, they can do what they need to do with their property, and I'll do what I want to do with my property. And like I said, I'm not going to make any apologies for that. We're here to discuss this, and like I said, I'm trying to be as candid as possible. But like I said, the recommendations, we'll work with the city to get that all hammered out if we need to be, and we'll move on with life.
All right, I have a couple of clarifying questions for staff. For the parking analysis, how many office spaces were assumed?
They needed 10, but they needed an additional ADA one with striping. So that's why they needed that additional.
Based off of just the square footage, or how many office spaces there were?
Correct. The square footage.
Okay, so there's a limit to what they can do there just based off of parking. I guess it doesn't presume the number of office spaces, but it's the square footage. And for the parcel in question, not the other two, do we have any indication there were specimen trees on the property?
I believe Mike was out there. He did not determine there were any. I think he didn't get out there until they were cut, but I think based on his...
He's pretty sharp. He can tell from what's left over. Yeah.
So I don't think there were any. I think if there were, we would have taken action on it.
Okay, I wanted to... You're right, you can cut down as many trees as you want as long as they're not specimen trees. And if there weren't any, then it doesn't mean we have to like the way it looks, but that's the extent of our ability to control it from the city's code point of view.
Well, my wife did put some wildflowers out there in the prairie area. We planted those this year. It looked awesome, I think. And we'll maintain it. We'll mow it again, and it will come back and it'll be prairie. But like I said, this isn't the end all be all for this property. There's going to be buildings throughout that area.
I'm just trying to separate the parcel at hand versus the feelings about the other two, and I agree that it'd be nice to know more about the other two, but we're unfortunately not taking up those items tonight. So I'm just trying to keep things linear so we can get somewhere on this and make a reasonable recommendation one way or the other. Commissioner Barnes.
Yeah, just kind of my simple view on this was recognizing that we were only talking about one parcel here, but there indeed may be some grander questions with the multiple parcels and other developments that will warrant a lot further discussion. The staff recommendations, the 9 recommendations that you provided, I recommend proceeding with those for this particular parcel, specifically where no access on River Drive, those kind of things. Does this address all of the other issues? There are questions, not yet, but for the purposes of what's before us, that's what I would bring
I want to
back.
make one clarifying question with staff about, there was a comment about the easement going through to River Birch so that that house behind it could potentially connect to the road someday.
Correct.
Is that document still a legal document that's in place?
Yeah, it's not well defined. It's on a plat of the condo plat that showed a 20-foot access area that was allowed for connection to that last house, but it didn't contemplate or address the issue of through connections to the commercial. So I think we have the ability to restrict that only to that house.
So I was going to suggest perhaps if that connection is ever made for that house, that the driveway be severed and not allowed to pass straight through.
I would have an issue with that. And the reason being is because you have a development agreement that was agreed to when that was developed. And doing developments other ways, the state, and the reason why that's in there is a utility and access easement.
We're just talking about the parcel to the north,
Yep,
not
no,
the
I
parcel
understand
to the
that.
west.
6720 is that one. So we have a water main that comes through there. The state can exit or remove driveways on the state highway if they feel that the traffic, and 20 years from now, what's the traffic going to be on Mequon Road? So if you do that, you're defeating the purpose why we have access for those 3 lots. The second thing is, if it is ever developed, your fire department is going to want access, egress on both sides. So you're diminishing the value of my partials if you do that.
I think the staff recommendations today remove the access altogether, as written.
And indeed, that's
What they
the
said,
term that
that's
I'm
something
seeing.
we're not going to agree to. And like I said, those are recommendations, and I'm willing to work with, but I'm not going to sit here and pull punches. That is something that we're not going to allow.
I think it's in your rights to require that if that access point to the north is ever put in, that you can sever the connection between the two. I think that's acceptable, because it's a commercial property. And you can have water utility easements through there. You don't need to.
Yeah, those two aren't the same thing. Those are different things.
And we keep hearing about this future development of this property. Right now, the rest of that parcel is zoned R3 1 acre and R4 3/4 acre. There's no rights, no vested rights to any of that other than what's there now. So if a development proposal ever does come forward in the future, it's going to require rezoning, which is going to be a whole new ballgame for everybody in the neighborhood, I'm sure. And they may have requirements at that point. So that could be addressed at a later time. So it doesn't diminish the value of the property, because the property is what it is right now. It's 3 single-family homes with 3 separate parcels, zoned B3.
No, with that suggestion, I was trying to preserve more of your rights to put an access point there, not take it away. But the staff recommendations as of now eliminate that altogether, which I think would be unfortunate if it was just that one single-family home. That could have access, but no one would want commercial traffic going straight through this parcel. I certainly wouldn't. I don't think the other commissioners would as well, especially if we live there. But that would need to be an amendment added. It would amend. Well, I'm not sure we have an motion yet, but if it survives, it would need to be an amendment. Which condition was that?
Condition number 9, I believe, where it says states no.
I think it'd be condition 5 would need to be slightly amended to, if that was utilized, to sever the connection to the commercial property to the south. But I'm not saying that's an amendment. If someone would like to make it, they certainly can. Bruce was pretty close to a motion there.
Yeah, I guess I'll move, help me out here if you can, but in the context of what we're talking about, I move acceptance, or we move forward with the staff recommendation with one minor tweaking to, is it condition number 5 regarding the driveway? And maybe if you can help me out a little bit. Just
If the connection is ever made to the north for that parcel, that it was severed to the connection to the property to the south.
Thank you. Yeah, that's confirming that it would be independent of the other 2 parcels.
There's a motion.
Friendly amendments. Extending the fence along the east to the north property line, or to the point where it's allowed, given setback. Then should there be a patio, that it have a privacy fence, and that the hours of operations be limited to 9 to 5.
I don't think we're able to do the last one. It's got certain rights in the zoning district. But if the motioner agrees to those proposed friendly amendments, then I think we've got
I agree with the first 2. Yep.
okay, thank you. So is there officially a second?
Before I do that, can I make an amendment to the friendly amendment?
Certainly you can propose anything
I
you
would
so
like
choose.
to clarify, if the patio is added, what I'd like to see is the fence extended to the west on the property line. So essentially, it's gonna be going in the northwest to shield that patio. So not just to the north line, amended to the west, or,
Just make a recommendation saying any future expansion to the outdoor area would have to return to planning commission, so we don't have to address it.
that'll work.
I think we probably have to restate the whole shebang maybe to be appropriate. Good luck.
Commissioner Barnes, start over again.
It's a little bit, I would propose that we accept the city staff recommendations 1 through 9 with a couple of modifications, including to statement number 5, that indeed there'll be no expansion of the driveway connecting in the future.
Condition 5, if the driveway access to the north for the property to the north is connected, then the driveway will be severed to the property
It
going
would
to
be
the south.
severed as part of the, if there was a residential driveway on the street. Thank you.
And Commissioner Shoren's friendly amendment
For the fence,
for the fence to go as far north as
To go-
possible,
thank you.
and Commissioner Stoker's no, go as far to the north. No, it's on the same parcel. It's on the same parcel.
Of the easement is on 6720. We're talking about 6714.
Through that easement, they are intertwined, and therefore I think this is appropriate. I don't know how you can separate the two.
I guess I'm not understanding. You're saying they're intertwined, but the easement is only for the 6720 right now.
There.
I think we've got a condition of approval that is binding, and whether we take it and act on it or not is up to you. So we have a motion and a second. Any further who
What about
who,
the-
who
the
seconded?
fencing?
We have a motion.
Here.
If I understand it, that's outside the parcel.
No, it's not. It's on the same parcel. So bring up packet page 30, since we're discussing it. Those two buildings are on the same parcel. That's the parcel in question. There's another building to the north.
If you look at the overhead, you can see, so this 6-foot privacy fence would run north-south, again, from the northeast corner of the building down to the southeast corner of the parking lot, and then wrap west towards this low-growth area, potentially.
So the only thing, the only amendment I have is that it's taken further to the north.
The north property line.
To-
Correct. Yes.
I think what we just heard was a request to extend it farther to the south.
I know.
Okay. If you eliminated the little stretch that goes east and west and rotated it 90 degrees to the south, that would be about enough to accomplish the request, and it wouldn't be any more fencing than as shown here today. At some point, when you put that fence down farther, then the lights are cut off by the existing single-family home that's standing there. We've got photos and we can visualize it quite well from the overhead view, but if no one wants to make that motion, that's fine. Commissioner Chorin.
My thoughts are that with that fence turning and running to the west, south of the parking lot, that it should address any cars that are turning and maneuvering to leave, to address your concern. I think it should do it as well. I mean, the mayor suggested to take that small section and then rotate it so that it just makes the east fence longer. I think in either way, it addresses the concern you have about the headlights.
So in effect, move this section of this section right here, just move that 90 degrees so that it goes that way.
I agree, it probably accomplishes the same either way if you draw a car in there and show where the lights are gonna shine.
But I guess if that would help the neighbor's concern, then that's fine.
I think to be clear, though, I think the neighbors are hoping the fence goes all the way to Mequon Road, which I don't think it needs to.
It's kind of, we're kind of past public comment. I'm quickly making this too circular. So we'll be done with public comment. We need a second.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further debate? We can continue to debate the fence. We can keep talking until there's a vote.
I don't want to make a friendly amendment, but what is staff's opinion on the fence going east-west versus north-south? Was there logic behind it? I understand that it's probably going to accomplish the same thing either way. Was there a reason you didn't want it to go further to the south as opposed to turning it east-west like that?
We felt that wrapping it kind of like this, where it goes north-south quite a ways along where the office building is and where the parking lot is, and then wrapping this way would mitigate a lot of the light pollution or noise pollution to the east. And then if people are parking north-south along the south of the parking lot, that they would be mitigating light pollution to either the existing home that's there or even Mequon Road.
Yeah, if you had Google Maps up that showed the home that's in question, you can visualize a line drawn from where that fence runs, and it does provide an adequate cutoff for ground level light pointed in a direction.
I think the other issue, since there's no left turn in there, you're not getting any movement coming in left with shining in the house. It's all coming, it's gotta be right in, right out, so you won't impact the neighbors with the houses, other than the house itself. You're gonna have people coming into that house, which is not really part of the commercial use.
So this fence as drawn achieves the
Yes.
mitigation desired. Okay, Commissioner Parrish.
Yeah, it was a good conversation. I guess I would just add, I totally agree this property should not be zoned what it's zoned, but it is what it is on the same hand. I hesitate on requiring the owner to do any additional or significant improvements, that would increase their investment, because my personal view is this property should be residential again. When you're talking about like the wider driveway and the ADA accessible parking, and I just want to make it very clear, I'll definitely oppose any sort of like multifamily or some references to other uses here. And this is a residential neighborhood. It's properly zoned. We'll respect your, the zoning of the property. And I don't know, I think we should work with you to find a way to make it residential again. It's just going to be the biggest nightmare for you to try to rezone it. Thank you. To something other than residential.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further conversation? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Commissioner Barnes,
Aye.
Commissioner Chorin,
Aye.
Commissioner Schaefer,
Aye.
Commissioner Stoker, Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Mayor Nurbin.
Aye.
Vote passes.
All right. Congratulations, this item is over.
Thank you.
We'll now take up a policy discussion on guidelines for commercial structures. So I think staff's proposing a few amendments to what's in the code today to make our intent on development standards, primarily for Port Washington Road, a little more clear.
Yes, this is just part of our efforts that we're undertaking to go try to improve the area along Port Washington Road. We've been working on streetscaping. We've been working on a market analysis. In this phase, we were looking at design guidelines for the area, but we kind of determined that we already have design guidelines for Town Center, Uleo Creek, and the rural business area. So if we do design guidelines for just Port Washington Road, that leaves just few isolated commercial pockets in the city that are left without any design guidelines or our default design guidelines. So we thought maybe we just update the entire design guidelines for the entire city, excluding those areas that already have their own specific design guidelines, and then we would address it throughout. So that's one of the, I guess, kind of the first question we have for the commission, is that the acceptable path we should go down? Our current design guidelines are fairly vague. There's not a lot of teeth to them. The proposed ones, that we'll get into some a little bit more details later on, but the other thing that we don't really address in either our current ones or the proposed ones, we don't really have a lot of language in there regarding industrial or multifamily uses. So I guess that's another question for the commission at this point. Again, this is a preliminary, we're at the beginning stages of this, so this is not gonna be the final version of this by any stretch. But I guess one of the questions we're looking for to get answered is, do we want specific design guidelines that address industrial or multifamily, or should we address those on a case-by-case basis, kind of like we have done? I think from staff's perspective, we've had some issues with industrial buildings with mostly proposing metal panels on buildings, so I think we can tighten up some of that language, but I don't know if we need to take it too far to a level where we have exacting material requirements and things like that. So that's one of the questions I have. And then multifamily, you know, we typically, every multifamily development we do is, right now, has been in town center. I don't know if we're gonna get a lot of it outside town center. My guess is it's gonna be a PUD, and I think there's gonna be a lot of oversight of any development that happens in that area, so I'm not sure if we need to really delve into that whole multifamily issue at this time. In regards to the actual,
I'll agree with you. The multifamily is almost always gonna be a PUD if it happens, so that gives us every lever we ever need to pull and more. Does anyone have any thoughts on industrial? I think we've got maybe more time to deal with that. There's not a lot of industrial being built. I mean, we've had a little bit recently, but
I mean, most of the time, it's in our B5 zoning district, and we allow precast, we allow split face in certain circumstances. Again, the biggest issue we've had is, like, if you remember Cops Industries, they had an area for future expansion. They didn't want to put in precast or concrete. They wanted to do a metal panel because they didn't want to have to take it out later. Those are the times we have issues with design, or if we have like a smaller one-off shop in some location of the city, like along Don Bay Road, where they just want to put up a metal panel building with the recent one with the cars and the classic cars and things like that. So we don't see a lot of it, but I think we should maybe have some specific standards in there, but I don't know if we need to go into a too elaborate of design requirements for the industrial properties. I think most of the time, I think we can handle that through our site plan review and building and site plan review. So unless you guys have any other thoughts on that, I mean, we're open to hear it.
I'm fine with that approach. Bite this off in smaller pieces, and
yeah, that's
if we can get this done and handle that later or do it in a different way, I think that's fine.
So as far as the specifics, I have the proposed draft in the packet as well as our current standards. So what we try to do is we try to elaborate on some things. A lot of these things are things we've actually required throughout the last 15 years as a policy, and now we're just trying to ratify some of them. And then some of these are somewhat new. So, and I put some questions for you in the packet in terms of the primary, secondary materials. Are the types and the percentages something that we need to address, and are you okay with what we have in there now? I mean, right now we have 60% primary, 20% maximum secondary material. This is a little different than Town Center. Town Center right now has 80% primary, but that only includes the non-opaque section. So you take out the windows, and 80% has to be primary, and then 20 has to be secondary. So this one includes windows. I'm not sure exactly what that formula looks like. We're going to have some visuals for you next time to show you some existing buildings and kind of show you a percentage to see how you feel like. I think the biggest issue we had with Town Center was we gave a lot of waivers out over the years to those standards, because having that 80% primary, they felt the buildings were too heavy, and a lot of times they did look heavy with all that brick and stone on there. So we did give waivers. I'd say we were about consistently between 50 and 60% primary on all of our Town Center buildings, unless it was the existing, like the public market where we used existing buildings, things like that. Anything new, was typically in that 50 to 60% primary with some secondary. So just to give you a little bit of kind of insight to that. Again, we'll try to give you some visual examples. We did a visual survey a number of years ago where we polled people on what buildings they like and didn't like. We can kind of show you them, and then maybe we can translate that into what those actual numbers look like. And then there's language in there about specific types of roofing materials. We think we covered most of the things we see. We did put some language in there for corner lots, requiring a two-story. This is somewhat new and requiring, nothing between the corner and the road besides the building. Now, this is again somewhat new because like even with our last approval for the spa, they did have parking to the south along Donjas Bay. Now, under this language, you would have to put that building up against that corner. You wouldn't be allowed any parking or any other thing besides that building there. So that's something to think about. And the massing requirement, we don't typically require two-story. Now, with certain circumstances, we're going to have places where they just probably can't meet 2 stories because of parking or FAR and things like that. So we do have an exception in there that would allow for a 1-story if it's a substandard lot size. But for any other lot on the corner that would meet our requirements, they would have to do a 2-story building. We also put language in there for making sure the building's in context with the neighboring buildings. Now, again, we don't want to have, we have life storage. We don't want to actually have to match life storage at one point. But if there's 2 neighboring buildings that are 2-story of a certain size, we don't want to see a 1-story kind of fit in between there. That just doesn't keep the context of the neighborhood in place. I mean, these are things that are difficult to kind of plan out. So this is an early step at this. So we're just looking for early feedback. But this is one of the thoughts we had is we wanted to make some visual context along that corridor. The other thing we put in here is something we've kind of dealt with somewhat was the drive-through requirements, especially for financial institutions. We typically require them to be in the back. Our code doesn't say that, but as a condition, we always make that as a condition. And then we also put in there with the case of like PNC Bank, if it's on a corner, they have to integrate that drive-through into the architecture of the building. I mean, some people don't like PNC, but I think what they did really do a good job with is that drive-through where it actually is hidden, so you can't really tell it's a drive-through versus your typical bank with like just a canopy off the back. So anytime there's a drive-through proposed on a corner, we would like to see that recommendation be put in the design standard so they're aware of that at the beginning. We had a recent conversation with a potential bank on another corner in that intersection. And what we saw for some preliminary designs is not really something we thought was acceptable. So something like this would help alleviate that kind of issue. So other than that, I mean, I know there's a lot in here, and again, we're not trying to solve anything tonight, but we're just trying to get some preliminary feedback before we go too far down a path that the commission thinks we shouldn't go down. So I'll just open it up for discussion or questions if you have anything else, and we'll take it from there.
Commissioner Parrish.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here tonight. This is definitely one of my topics I was interested in. Alderman Strelchuk sends his regards, by the way. Okay, so yeah, this topic came also from council because of some of the projects that have come through. People just not being satisfied with some of the projects. I know that the spa, there's a couple of components of it, but the design, certain projects at these corners are getting city TIF money. So we darn well better end up with what we want in all these cases if, they're getting TIF money. So this is such a critical conversation and important that everyone weigh in. I never really cared for the PNC building. It always felt just right on top of that corner. Kind of like the site layout of the spa. Didn't feel so crowded on that intersection. Certainly less busy intersections to have a building right overlooking the road. There's this massing to it and the scale, and you did a very nice job touching on that in the paragraph. It was really elegant because I don't know how else you would write something like that. But in my mind, part of what this is getting away from the square buildings that we've seen propagating along the corridor that typically tend to be banks and fast foods. It's a much simpler, more cost-effective design. That's, with an angled roof, pitching in one way. I mean, it's a pretty significant departure from what historically was along the corridor. So, I mean, I'm not saying you can't. Well, no, I prefer not to have box buildings any further, and having some character to the roof line in proportion to the buildings around it.
Yeah, we did add a requirement, if we didn't prohibit flat roofs directly, but if you do have a flat roof, we did put language in there that you'd have to have 2 or more roof planes at least, so there wouldn't be just a box, you'd have to undulate those roof planes to get some dimension.
Yeah, and I don't know that, that it needs to be a flat, I'm not opposed to a flat roof. I'm just talking
Right.
about getting away from a box and having buildings with character and
Yeah,
and
that's
so
the hard
on.
part, is how to elaborate
Yeah.
to a guideline.
Yeah.
And, and I think, people don't like the PNC. I think the PNC issues, I don't want to belabor the point of the building and design, because I think most people have an objection to it because it's so close to the corner, but that's because it's on a state highway and the access points had to be where they were, so the only way that could get developed is if that was pushed to the corner, because DOT controls that intersection, and they required both of those driveways to be furthest away from that intersection as possible.
Okay.
So we had no choice to shift it up. Now, if they owned more land, that building probably would have been pushed off that corner more. But that's one of those non-conforming parcels. We had to deal with what we could.
But the building itself is a good example, I think, of architecture and, buildings with depth and character. And I agree that the drive-through should be tucked into the building and shielded and in the rear. Those are my main points. Thank you.
Commissioner Barnes.
Yeah, just a couple minor things. One thing I was wondering about in the context of your describing it for Port Road, et cetera, is there going to be a similar sort of set of standards for the someday with the southwest corner of town, that type of thing? Or is it just, we'll see what we need, when it comes? So it's just some information I'm looking for.
So, historically, we didn't really ever have any segregation between our design guidelines, but we started with the town center, basically. I think that was the first one where we created a specific town center guidelines, and that was because we created a whole different atmosphere. We had multi-use buildings, we had multiple story buildings that was somewhat unique to Mequon, so those areas we felt were specifically needed their own design guidelines, because we couldn't incorporate that into a general design guideline. And then the same happened with basically our rural B7 rural business. It's kind of a odd kind of zoning district where it's rural but it's business, so then we want to make sure we emphasize the character of the ruralness when we did buildings. Now, we don't have a lot of buildings in that area. In fact, like Secret Garden is one of the few buildings that were built in that zoning district, which does have a rural feel to it, and it's somewhat business related. And then the third one was Uleo Creek, which was north of Port Washington, north on Port Washington, north of Highland. Again, they wanted to create a certain rural feel to that, so there was specific requirements there. If there's another area that we contemplate that for and there's a rationale for it, then we may do that, but we haven't really thought about that in terms of context for any other area.
And that's fine. Just, I guess, out for a someday
Yeah.
question. One thing that I do agree with the DOT, by the way, on access, and I think whether it's a state highway or not, it's something that does relate to building placement and constraints that I think whether it's a state highway or not, we need to always keep in mind. Just a couple of minor little things was, you note there about roofs, that large roof overhangs that dominate the building are discouraged. And this is just a personal kind of question or thought, but frankly, whether it fits in a particular area or not, I think the Frank Lloyd Wright roof style and stuff can be neat, and I guess I just question the need for including that statement. Not that I'm saying we built. Yeah, what does it mean?
Well, I think it, again, it depends on what you're building, and it's hard to put a standard together that would deal
Sure.
with every type of architecture that's out there. So that was put in there just to protect for other types of buildings that maybe where a roof overhang isn't necessarily fitting with the building as protection. I kind of don't like anything that says discourage. I think we should either prohibit or allow something. So that's something we can definitely look at and decide how we want to treat it.
And I guess my own thought is take the sentence out, but it's a strong,
Okay.
just a mild suggestion.
Sure.
And then the only other thing that coming from access and egress control, we've got all this nice presentation about the buildings, the lots, et cetera, but do we need to bring in, you know, the driveways are gonna be placed here or there or not, those kind of things. And I don't wanna open it up to that if we don't need to, but it's,
Well,
from
I
my
mean,
perspective, I'm just seeing that as a,
we already have requirements for spacing, and then some of the spacing is Ozaki County controlled, some of the spacing is DOT controlled, so it's really hard to kind of dictate that. The only thing I think that we could ponder at this point is, you know, like Port Washington Road was built under that suburban model of having the parking in the front, and right now that is kind of dictated by our code in a sense, where we require a 60-foot setback, and then if you have parking in front, it's another 35 feet, so you have a 95-foot setback. Now, we could ratify a change to that and require buildings to be closer by eliminating that requirement for having such a large setback or pushing the parking in the back. I know we tried that in the past. We've gotten pushback from a lot of the developers. You know, it's like we hear kind of a mixed things, though. We hear at one point they say we're too far back, nobody can see us, and then they say we got to have parking in the front because nobody's going to come here. So it's got to be one or the other. So I think, and then we try to do, okay, how about maybe just one row of parking? No, we can't just do it. It's not efficient to do one row of parking. We got to have two. So it's a tough one because I hear conflicting things from the market about what's acceptable or not. I mean, even like with the pavilions, everybody complains, all the tenants in there complain that nobody can see us from the road, so we need banners up at the road. But they didn't want to build it up at the road because they wanted the parking there. So, you know, it's a circular thing. So
and it's that circular thinking that, I don't know, try to avoid as best we can.
So I think
in
we
your
have to deal with
document.
that through setback requirements. Now, what we did put in here is the requirement they'd have to have a sidewalk and access from the road side to the building. So that kind of helps us push for something we're looking for in terms of design. So they're going to have to at least address it. And we've done that, I think, pretty well recently with like the North Shore Bank, Associated Bank. They all have doors that have sidewalks and pathways that go up to the public sidewalk, even though they do have parking kind of off to the side. So I think we're trying, I mean, but I think it becomes difficult, especially on Port Road, where we have so many different types of parcels, size, shape, and everything, that if we prohibited parking in the front, I think we'd get a lot of blowback from a lot of different developers and businesses.
Okay.
Commissioner Parrish.
Yeah, this may be more signage related, but just thinking to, you know, nothing where like an attribute of the building is like a walking advertisement where you would have like see-through glass through the whole front of the building, and then, you know, a massive sign for that.
Yeah, and that's
company.
where I think it's hard. We have language in our sign code, but that's kind of easy to get around a little bit depending on how you view it. I mean, we have a 25% window requirement, but that's typically per window. So then if you have a bunch of windows or a big window, that's a big area. The way to, I think, deal with that is, if you want to go down that path, is having a larger percentage of primary material that would kind of shrink your amount of fenestration you would have. But I don't know if we want to go down that path either or not. I mean, I understand where you're coming from. I just don't know how you regulate
Yeah,
that.
I'm just more giving you guys stuff to think about. I'm
Yeah.
also thinking back to, let's say a company's logo color is fluorescent. No, it's not. It happens to be fluorescent purple. And as a result, they want to paint their building fluorescent purple, which maybe they have a good argument there in that case.
I think there's something in there
Yeah, we did
specifically for that, yeah.
We did address that. Maybe we could change
branding.
the language. We talk about
Yeah.
design of national franchises shall reflect the local architecture and form details, material, and massing. I think we can address that, not even just national retailers. It should be just chains of any kind, and then add color in there. Because we have a potential tenant looking at a place in Mequon now that has certain color requirements for their buildings, which I don't think we're going to really like to see either. So we're
We
kind of
like natural building material colors generally.
yeah. So
there you go.
I think we could tighten up that language. That's under number 10, and kind of talk about that instead of just national. We can spread that out to just retailers in general, chain retailers in general. We'll think of some language.
Even if it's not a chain,
Yeah,
it could,
yeah. That makes sense.
yeah. Good discussion. Anyone else want to chime in?
Just
It's a lot there. Maybe some pictures at some point would.
Yeah, I think our
I
next
can
one, we'll bring back some of the visual preference survey to show what people liked and didn't like, and then we can weigh in, and then I'm sure we'll have more recommendations or opinions on what they like and don't like. It's kind of a tough thing to kind of nail down. People tend to like something and don't like something, but they don't exactly know why. So
Yes. That's what I was struck, sorry.
Go ahead.
That is what I was struck with when I was reading this. This is not my wheelhouse, right? I know this is not my expertise, so I deferred to Commissioner Chorin, or Commissioner people who this is their business, right? Or to all of you as experts. So what I do appreciate is the proactive trying to establish standards. So using the Metaspa as an example, right? We kind of knew what we wanted there or what we didn't want there, but without something to fall back on and point to, it's just opinion.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm assuming this was in the works well before that because it takes so long for all this work to come together, but I guess just kudos on attempting to try to pull this together. It's a nebulous thing to try to address, but
yeah, and
having something is
and then on the
better
flip
than
side, it's difficult because one of the first town center projects that we had to review was Spectrum Investments, which didn't meet any of our
Yes.
guidelines, and we granted waivers to all of them because people liked the way the building looked. So
does look
it's,
nice.
it's
Did a good job.
And we can continue to do that.
yes, you
Just a
still
little
have-
bit more information up front. Yeah, it's hard to describe.
Well, we all have individual. I mean, it's funny
Describe
when-
aesthetically pleasing, and you could draw a picture of a person that had each, 10 individually awesome features. They just don't look good together. I mean, that's kind of, it's hard to be totally rational about what looks good because it's a whole other side of your brain. It's hard for the rational side writing black and white text to describe what looks good.
Yeah, I think it's good though. I think the overall objective, I think, is to have baseline so that we can say no to things without having to argue about why. And
Here's a fun exercise. Take what you wrote, put it into Chat GPT, and have it draw you pictures of buildings and see if it's what you would like. Use AI to see if it passes the test. I'm just joking, maybe.
we'll have Evan Evan can work on that one.
Anyone else? We don't need a recommendation. I'm just looking for a little more input.
Yeah, there was this little update. If there's something you see that you just don't like or think it should be changed, you can email us separately too. You don't have to let us know tonight.
I would encourage you to reach out to the other commissioners that weren't able to come here tonight. This is one where you'd actually want everyone possible to show up.
Yeah.
And just see if they had any thoughts after reading through it. But
It'll be continued. This won't be the last time you'll see it. I'm sure we'll have a couple rounds of it again going forward. So.
sounds good. Going once, going twice. I don't see any other comments, so I hope you got what you needed, or at least enough to keep going. And we got a few announcements. The next meeting is March 18th at 6 o'clock. And the April meeting has been changed to April 29th. So if that works for everyone. I'd have to refresh my memory, but
It was the 15th, yes.
okay, so we had to move it. It was either a week before or a week after. I think we picked the week after.
I think it's Passover.
Yeah.
So as we saying,
Pardon?
April 29th.
429. Yeah.
It hasn't yet been changed on the calendar. We want to make sure it was approved by or the commission knew first.
Sure.
We'll change it on the
It
calendar.
works for the 5 of us or 6 of us. Hopefully we get a quorum. But I don't see any objections, so I'm assuming it's going to work, and we'll make it work. Or we won't, and we'll have a really long meeting in May. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned.